Hi there, I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
We are not hiding in a closet.
Much like our brave, dear leader did.
Didn't you notice how he is always showing up in military uniform? Look at the tough guy.
Yeah, well, it shows just what a coward he actually is.
You're tuned into Video Radio, independent news with no propaganda whatsoever.
Yes, we're here for your intelligent, inquiring minds.
And your inquiring mind wants to know how it worked? This is how it worked.
Here's a rundown on the shooting that happened in Ottawa on Wednesday.
At 9:52, the RCMP is inundated with 911 calls at the memorial. This was right downtown, and we were there to see this. Seconds after shooting Corporate Cirillo, the suspect has parked a car just behind the memorial, as you're seeing there. Now, this is Michael Zahav Bibo getting into the car seconds after that. He seems to have some kind of long coat and scarf on. He's a tall, thin man, you can see there. Then he takes the car, this car here. This is a photo I took at about just after 10, a couple of minutes later. Police told me this is the suspect's car. It jibes with the video we've got here. He parks the car there and makes his way somehow up to center block. At center block, he makes his way into the front doors, and then a furious exchange of gunfire with RCMP and Parliament Hill staff, including the Sergeant-at-Arms, Kevin Vickers, takes place. And he obviously had an assault rifle here that's semi-automatic. Listen in. This furious exchange of gunfire. Everyone in Parliament Hill, tourist MPs and staffers, take cover in that exchange of gunfire. Michael Zahav Bibo is shot dead. A member of the Parliament Hill security staff is wounded in the leg. Chaos ensues and a lockdown begins. Immediately, security protocol kicks in and Parliament Hill is locked down.
So that was like an immense coverage. I mean, it was impressive.
Well, that was CBC's coverage, and they had it pretty factual. They didn't get too much hyperbole in there.
Yeah, the Americans went right off the deep end. We saw some deep end coverage in the London, but we'll cover that in a bit. Oh, by the way, we're not in a closet hiding.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a second. That's what we got, right? The differences in coverage.
The difference in coverage between the American news and the Canadian news. And take a look at it for yourself. Here's a little clip from Newsy discussing that subject.
And I'm going to go check my notes.
Depending on where you live, you might have heard different details surrounding Wednesday's shooting near Canada's Parliament Hill in Ottawa, Ontario.
The new information that we're getting is that there were numerous gunmen this morning at that war memorial.
Terror on Canada's Parliament Hill.
It's clear the situation is not over. It is clear that police are in a tense standby situation and continue to be on the lookout.
That last one was Peter Mansbridge from Canada's CBC. The first three were U.S. cable news channels Fox and CNN. All of them were covering the same hectic situation where a gunman who shot and killed a Canadian soldier later died in a standoff.
And often rumors start in a situation like this. We're trying to keep them out of our coverage, but when they come sometimes from official sources, like members of Parliament, you tend to give them some credence.
One gunman has been killed. One or more gunmen may still be on the loose. Right now, Parliament Hill in Ottawa on lockdown.
There's a noticeable difference in the way each network decided to cover the breaking news. CBC, with a slower delivery, reminded viewers multiple times it wouldn't report anything until it received confirmation. That stood in contrast to CNN's more fast-paced coverage, which seemed to try to get as much information on the air as possible. It didn't go unnoticed on social media either. Folks on Twitter were quick to point out the difference between the two. Media watchdogs at home did the same. Mediaite wrote that Mansbridge exemplifies the difference between U.S. and Canadian breaking news. A writer at TV Newser lauded Mansbridge's coverage, saying it wasn't loud and urgent, it was quiet and somber, and as such it felt very, very important. It felt proper. On the media's Breaking News Consumer's Handbook gives several suggestions for monitoring breaking news coverage and point-blank refers to early network reports as often, quote, sketchy. It recommends skepticism of anonymous sources, outlets quoting other outlets, and any suspicious images that might be photoshopped. For Newsy, I'm Sebastián Martínez.
So you know, Fear, fear, fear.
Yeah, but of course CBC was a little more measured in their response, a lot more factual and responsible reporting.
Yes, they got kudos from the Americans for that. We saw alternative media really pick up on the fact that there was a lot of fear, except for the CBC.
Of course, Ottawa was in lockdown for several hours, even canceled a couple of NHL hockey games.
Oh, well, we'll miss that. But while this was occurring, just so happens, by coincidence, and for the Conservatives, they were passing a spying bill the Supreme Court already said sucked.
Yeah, they were already debating more legislation to give powers to police and CSIS to spy on Canadians and to take away our liberties even more.
Now they're going to say it's legal to look up your skirt. So, check this out.
Last week, our government proposed amendments to legislation under which the Canadian Security Intelligence Service operates. And as you know, Mr. Speaker, in recent weeks I have been saying that our laws and police powers need to be strengthened in the area of surveillance, detention, and arrest. They need to be much strengthened. And I assure you, Mr. Speaker, that work, which is already underway, will be expedited.
Let's get more on that. We're now joined by Joshua Blakeney, Press TV's correspondent, who's joining us live now from Calgary. And what do we know about the details of those measures that will be brought in now that in the aftermath of this event?
Well, we just heard Prime Minister Stephen Harper, of course, say that last week he gave the police extended powers and helped to allow for the further surveillance of Canadian citizens. So these incidents that have arisen in the last few days are a vindication for Stephen Harper, and he's of course saying, look, I was right. Of course, many people will be saying this is an extraordinary coincidence that, you know, just as Canada's government is making all these very controversial decisions to go to war and to crack down on civil liberties in this country, along comes a so-called ISIS-inspired terrorist to shoot a soldier at Canada's National War Memorial and Canada's Parliament, a kind of symbol of democracy. And of course, there are many in North America now, a burgeoning number of skeptics who do invoke the epithet false flag terrorism when these things arise. And unfortunately, the mainstream media and opposition parties in this country don't display that sort of skepticism toward the narratives that are produced by the state, by Stephen Harper and by the police and by intelligence agencies in this country. Of course, when these terrorist incidents occur, these intelligence agencies get bigger budget.
Indeed, I do apologize, Joshua, once again. It seems the time has gotten the best of us, but of course, as always, we do sincerely appreciate that detailed update. That was Joshua Blakeney speaking to us live from Calgary.
So we can be pretty certain that the police and spy agencies will get more powers to separate us from our liberties just a little bit more.
Yeah, and we're watching this too. What we're expecting, what we're demanding, is that when the Liberals get power, and a majority when they join with the NDP, that they overturn some of this fascist police state stuff. And we're kind of hoping that that's what's going to happen.
But the timing is just a little coincidental, and we do know that intelligence agencies have been known in the past to set these kind of things up.
Yeah, well, tough for them. But now, when you start getting into analysis and you start looking at the way independent media works, people are critical.
And people are asking questions about whether or not this event was staged, a false flag, as it could be.
As just so happens, they were passing spy bills in the background. Well, let's take a look at one of the dissenting voices.
What's up, Gary Franchi here. We're at Next News Network, and we're getting some reports done. We've got some breaking information regarding the Associated Press has just put out a statement or an article that's quite curious. Mark brought it to my attention. Mark, what do you got on that story?
Well, it turns out just yesterday we reported about the shooting at the Canadian Parliament, and at first, you know, information was flying out. We didn't know exactly what was happening. Police said at first they were looking for 3 suspects. Now officials in Canada say there was only one shooter and he was gunned down in Parliament. What's interesting is that we're learning that Parliament had on the schedule this week to vote about the powers of the CSIS, which is basically America's version of the CIA. It's their surveillance agency. And later on this week, meaning today or tomorrow, Parliament was already planning on voting on expanding the powers of Canada's government to spy on their own people and to limit what they call people that disturb freedom. So it's interesting to see those two. A lot of people are starting to draw those connections on the internet, and we'll see kind of where this goes from here.
All right, Mark, thanks for that. So a very interesting development, as you can see, that the Associated Press is reporting that there was, in fact, something on the books that would be passed that would basically create more surveillance, almost like a Patriot Act or a higher level of CIA for the Canadians. So when you have an attack that happened just days before that type of a vote is to take place, you can only question if, in fact, that event, that shooting, was staged in order to drum up more support for that bill. Gary Franchi signing off at the Next News Network.
So the moment that the hype came out, I thought to myself, wow, false flag?
Yeah, that's what I asked myself as well.
You know, and it just so happens that the guy's got mental health issues. Once again, if we solve poverty and mental health issue problems, these things probably won't crop up, but they certainly do improve fascism.
And maybe we shouldn't be bombing countries in the Middle East.
Yeah, maybe, just maybe. Coming up next, we're going to talk about NORAD and some other security issues,
as well as other interesting bits of information.
I'm Darren Howard.
And I'm Robert Nisbet.
You're tuned into Video Radio, independent media
for an intelligent world.
Stay tuned. We'll be back to laugh at more.
Canada had a minority government. The Liberals and the Tories went head to head, had their share of scandals, lies and plots. We voted this guy in, and everybody's got the majority blue. The majority blue. The majority blue. The majority blue. Well, we're all sitting here like goddamn fools. One guy's in charge of making all of the rules. Lord, 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 the majority blue. Never mind the fake late or the gun registry. Forget about G20 if you can. Forget it if you're thinking of retiring in the next couple years. I hope you don't mind changing plans. Thinking the majority blue. Majority blue. Majority blue. The majority blue. Yeah, you don't want to join them and you're not allowed to beat them. Tell me where the hell is Jack Layton when you need him. Lord, 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 got the majority blue. Tucked in her prison bed, 3 meals a day and a roof above her head. I hear they're building new ones, I bet you they'll be nice. Not a bad way to spend the next 10 to life with the majority blue. The majority blue. Got the majority blue. The majority blue. Yeah, they get you where they want you, then they kick you in the balls. Misleading voters with the robocalls. Lord, 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 got the majority blue. Yeah, we're all sitting here like goddamn fools. One guy's in charge of making all of the rules. Lord, 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 got the majority blue. I said, Lord, 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 got the majority blue.